What's up, everybody? Welcome to Hammerdown Motorsports. If you guys are new to the channel, my name is Steve Fast. Behind me we have our 2022 F350 Super Duty with the 6.7 liter power stroke, and we've been doing some minor modifications just to kind of improve this truck, fix some of the things the factory maybe overlooked as far as some of the rusty components and all of that. We got the new wheels and tires. We have new shocks from Rough Country, which greatly improved our ride. And we put some other accessories on as well. Definitely check the playlist for everything we've done on this truck so far. But today we are taking the last shock. Well, I gotta say, I already did the mod. Everything is already done. We're just gonna kind of give you guys a quick overview, but I have not driven the truck yet, so we're gonna get the first impressions on the difference between having our stock steering stabilizer shock and now we have our V2 dual stabilizer shock from Rough Country on the truck, all installed. Gonna give you a quick look at that, kind of just give you guys what it looks like installed on the truck, because in the instructions it's a little tough to see kind of where everything goes until you really mock it up, which we'll get into that in a minute. So in your kit, you're going to receive this page right here for your instructions. You can see kind of how everything is laid out with our brackets and our clamps and all of that. You can see this is the bracket that goes to the differential, and then you can see this picture right here. And this is the one that I had a little bit of trouble with just because of, I don't know, sometimes when you read stuff, you think something in your head and you have to kind of actually see it on the truck to make it make sense. So now going over to the truck, you can see right here, this is where the bracket actually ends up. And it's really hard to see on that picture where that goes. So just to kind of clarify a little bit, the picture isn't the greatest, but this is where you're going to want to mount everything. Other than that, it's very simple installation as far as nuts, bolts, and washers. You're just going to want to put these clamps over this part of your tie rod. The smaller bolts are 25 foot-pounds, the larger ones are 60. So we have everything here nicely torqued up, ready to go. I'm gonna test it out, and then we're gonna actually go back and retorque everything, make sure everything stayed tight, and we're gonna see how well this thing performs on the road. But on a side note, you can see how nice these look under the truck. They have this brushed finish, and everything just looks so clean. Actually, one thing I always thought that was a little bit odd is they put the stickers on the shocks before you actually install them, and the stickers are kind of above here. It's really hard to see them. So you end up with just the silver in the front, which I actually think looks pretty nice and clean kind of deal here. But if they left the stickers in the box, then we can put them on and you could actually display what brand and all that you have on here. But this is what we're working with, and I think it looks really, really nice. So now it's time to take the truck down off the lift, and we can take it for a drive, give it a little bit of a shakedown, make sure that everything stayed torqued in the front when we get back, and just kind of give you an impression of how this thing handles now going down the road with all of our new shocks all the way around and our dual stabilizer from Rough Country. All right, so we're into our first mile of driving with our brand new steering stabilizers. And you can see as we're going over the bumps, everybody says, I don't know if you guys can see the driver of the passenger seat, that the passenger seat was moving around a lot when I was going over some rough road. Well, that's just kind of how these seats are. They do absorb some impact. So when you're driving along, the seat moves and then you don't end up taking that impact. So it's just part of the seat design. It's really not, it's not bumpy in here as it may look because the seat's moving, but that's just kind of how it is. Anybody who has these trucks will know exactly what I'm talking about. But as we're going down the road, I'm definitely enjoying the new ride from these new shocks. We're hitting the small little bumps. We're not getting that little bit of jarring you used to get before. And now the first thing I've noticed with the steering stabilizer shocks is there's not as much input needed in the steering wheel. And now with solid front axles, it's just kind of nature of the beast, especially with wider wheels, and they stick out a little further and you're not really in that perfect groove anymore with the road. They kind of want to take the truck different directions when you end up with bumps or all that kind of just, I guess, the way the roads are. They want to take the truck in different ways. But if you have the stock tires on, you're probably never going to notice this, but with the wider mud terrain, especially with the wider offset, it really kind of amplifies that. And that's really what I wanted to get eliminated by putting on these stabilizer shocks, to kind of take away any, I guess, unwanted
input from the road into your steering wheel, and just kind of limit the amount of steering input you're gonna have to put in as you're driving down the road. One thing I gotta say about the 6.7, just kind of on the side here, is the 6.7 is absolutely awesome. I mean, if you guys have been following along for a while, I did have my work truck, which was a Cummins, and I never had an issue with that engine whatsoever, but the 6.7, it's just got so much more power. And I did have a cab chassis, so it was detuned, and it wasn't the fun version that you would buy that had a regular bed on it. Then they turn them up a little bit, so I guess it's just different rules for the different models. But I definitely would recommend, if you're going to buy a truck, buy one with the regular bed on it, with a regular tuned engine, and then pull the bed off and put a service body on it if that's what you're using the truck for, because it makes it so much easier if you want to do any kind of modifications down the road. This truck, pretty much the world is open as far as modifications go. If it was the work truck cab chassis version, yeah, you just kind of run into a bunch of stuff that you wouldn't think that you would, because they're the same engine, but there is some differences. So just keep that in mind. If you want the big power, get the regular truck. That's something that I definitely learned. So one thing I noticed when I first bought the truck, everything was stock, and it rode okay. The stock tires are pretty good, the Michelin's, but they just didn't have that wow factor at all. And I mean, what I've got on here now is even not the craziest thing in the world, but it definitely gives it a little bit more of a custom look. But I did notice that it was a bit of a rougher ride, and I know I've heard people complain. They're like, wow, this thing drives like a school bus or whatever, because they're driving it on stock suspension, especially when you put a level kit in. Now you're going to take that shock to another position. I don't know if the characteristics of it change all that much by putting an extra like 2.5 inch spacer. But the only thing I think that would change at this point is possibly the coil springs, just because you're putting that much more tension onto that spring just to give you that little bit of lift, so it kind of compresses a little bit more. Have a variable rate spring probably would be a little bit better, but even as it is now, I mean, I definitely like the way that the truck handles compared to when it was brand new. Those stock shocks, would have gotten rid of them day one if I knew the difference. And this steering stabilizer setup, I mean, obviously this is the first 5 minutes of me driving it, but I really like the weight of the steering wheel now. I really like the way that it's going through all the bumps and everything, and it just feels a little bit more composed, not as much as me having to try to keep the truck in line. This now really helps that. It absorbs that extra bit of impact or whatever you're going to get from the imperfections in the road, especially if you're in rough road conditions, which a lot of these trucks are used heavily for work. And if you want to add that little extra bit of stability, these things are definitely worth the money. So if you've made it to this point in the video, definitely drop dual stabilizer in the comments section. And if you guys want to drop anything else in there, definitely drop any kind of comments or suggestions or anything you want to say at all. But that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button, and as always, keep that hammer down.
All right, so we're back from the drive. Just went through and torqued everything up again. Nothing moved except for I had a couple of U-bolts on the passenger side. Just moved a tiniest little bit. So it's always good to re-torque everything after you've given a little bit of a drive, just to make sure everything is still tight. And also, if you guys are wondering how to get this guy off. Now, I know you're gonna run into this, so that's why I'm putting this in here and I'm dropping bolts. But anyways, this part of the steering stabilizer shock from the factory, which is sitting in the truck just like this, I think it's, yeah, like this. And you're gonna be mad at this thing for a minute until you realize what you need to do. So you wanna loosen off this nut, obviously. I didn't loosen it off all the way, I just so enough you had a little bit of a gap, and I left this bolt on. And then what I did is I took this guy right here. Now it has to be thick enough. This is a good pickle fork. The ones that you get at AutoZone and stuff, they're usually the cheap ones, and they're usually thin, and it might not be thick enough. So if you can get something like this to get in there, I have it on my air hammer. You can get the ones that you can just pound on with a hammer as well. It is tricky to get in there if you don't have something like this, but this made the job like 2 seconds. I stuck it in there, thing popped out, and I was good to go.